Build creative confidence. Beat the inspiration addiction. Join the Writer's Gym. My guest at the Writer's Gym today is Graham Bartlett. After 30 years of policing, whereby Graham became Brighton and Hove Police's Chief Superintendent, a senior homicide detective and a public order and firearms commander, he is now a best-selling crime fiction and non-fiction author and police and crime advisor. Graham's debut non-fiction, Death Comes Knocking, written with Peter James, was a Sunday Times top 10 bestseller, and Peter and Graham followed this up with the critically acclaimed Babes in the Wood. Since then, Graham has had 3 solo crime novels published: Bad for Good, Sunday Times top 10 bestseller, winner of Crime Fiction Lovers Editor's Choice Award 2022, and nominated for Specsaver's Debut of the Year 2022, Force of Hate, and City on Fire. As a police procedure and crime advisor, Graham works with over 200 authors and TV writers, including Peter James, William Shaw, Ellie Griffiths, Anthony Horowitz, Ruth Ware, Mark Billingham, and the BBC, helping them inject authenticity into their work. He is a crime writing mentor with Jericho Writers, runs live and online crime writing courses, is a regular speaker at crime writing festivals, and appears in many true crime TV documentaries. Graham, as bios go, one of the things that just delights me is that we can absolutely see the interests and we can see how your career is built.
It's a bit wordy though, isn't it?
But it's great words.
I wrote all that, so I only got myself to blame.
Did you always know this was the direction you were heading in?
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. No, I joined the police when I was 18. Then there was only ever one plan for me, never a plan B. And I had a fabulous career in the police, 30 years in the police. And then I kind of stumbled into the writing world, really, completely by accident. Never had a notion of being a creative writer in any form. And just happenstance put me here, and now I kind of wouldn't want to be doing anything else. Something
that struck me, I will be spoiler free, I always make a point of being spoiler free, but something that absolutely struck me particularly in Bad for Good, the importance as a writer and the importance as a police officer of thinking the unthinkable. And again, I'm not going to say anything about who does what in that.
It's so tricky, isn't it, talking about books and not spoilers.
Does that feel like the thing for you that I guess with certainly for me, writing crime, or no, actually even for me reading crime, with something like Bad for Good, where the plot is based on something that somebody relevant, I think I can say this and be safe for future readers, would rather not be able to think is a possibility, and how we blindside ourselves. And I'm guessing that's a piece of human psychology you must have dealt with a lot.
Absolutely. And I'm going to have to be very careful here as well, not giving anything away. Well, all 3 of my novels really take as a start point an as is, and then I kind of try and imagine how terrible things can get with the wrong people, with the wrong circumstances, with the wrong political pressures, and I stretch it as far as I can. And I'm pretty confident in saying that nothing that happens in any of my novels couldn't happen. It could happen. And, if the stars misaligned, then certainly what you're referring to in Bad for Good could happen, and it would be catastrophic.
That, for me, I think is why reading crime fiction is something that I do recommend to clients who might not be writing crime fiction or be readers of crime fiction yet. But in terms of there not being things we can't do, or there not being directions in which we can't take it, I think it's a very good thing for memoirists as well, actually, that we can, unfortunately, train ourselves to think, am I allowed to use this story, or am I allowed to think this thought? Which is how the excuses for not writing start to feel like reasons that so-and-so might disagree with this version of events. But actually, for you professionally, that's a given. Of course, people are going to present different versions of events.
No, absolutely. And I actually found that particularly acutely when in my non-fictions. So in Babes in the Wood, which was a 30-year story of a double child murder, which there are no spoilers here because it's really in the public domain, where the killer was acquitted and then retried and convicted 30 years later. so many people were involved in that investigation over the 30 years. Now I've got kind of 100,000 words to tell that story. And I've had people come to me and go, yeah, but you didn't talk about this bit and I did that bit. And it's like, well, I know, and it's all true. And, but, I've had to take a particular angle. So in fiction, and I think this is the same with any genre at all. Everybody's truth is their own. So even the baddies in Bad for Good and Force of Hate and City on Fire, they're kind of, they're seeing the world and their actions and the opposite actions of the protagonist in a way that's authentic to them. And, obviously that's what then creates a story, because you get this kind of, this collision of these two narratives and values. And that's where the story comes from.
I don't know if it is for you, but certainly for me, it's a very enjoyable way of thinking that the phrase "get into the mind of the criminal" is how I find my keys when I've put them down around the house. So getting into the mind of a character who is fundamentally different in values to yourself or in circumstances to yourself, to me, that's the joy of it. That's the fascination.
Over my police career, I've dealt with some people that have done some very, very bad things, terrible things, awful, unforgivable things, but very few people who are intrinsically evil. So in each of those people that have done the terrible things, that there has been a justification in their mind. And it's getting into that mindset and understanding, okay, why did you think it would be okay to stalk down and kill that person, or to fleece all those old people of all that money, or carry out that burglary of a children's home, or whatever it is? What's the mindset? And then when you're writing, then you can because all your characters, you want them to be relatable. So hopefully you can get that kind of rationale out, even if the reader hopefully won't agree with it, but at least they'll understand it.
Can I talk around the idea of evil versus circumstances that you're touching on there? Regular listeners or my readers will be aware that I fictionalized a story about a stalker based on something that I'd experienced.
Okay, yeah.
And the reason I bring it up is when this thing happened, I received anti-Semitic emails that the language in them was so strong that I was standing next to this policeman who was saying, please send them to the police computer. And the police computer was rejecting the emails. We were standing there next to each other, trying to get the emails into the machine. And the machine was saying, no, thank you very much, because it was detecting all the language.
Yeah.
And I could feel the comedy as a writer brain, because it's never not there. I could feel the bit of you that's sort of narrating, so there was that side of it, but there was also the side that for this woman I represented pure evil, because A, I was Jewish, B, I was with a man that she considered hers, which needless to say was not how I saw it. But from her point of view, I was pure evil, and from my point of view, she was an anti-Semite with a history of physical violence. He'd arrived with a big bruise and a sort of blood coming out of his head. And so at that time I remember thinking, there is a story here, and it's about what people consider good and evil, because from our different points of view, it doesn't mean I equate them. I do not equate them morally. But that for me is almost the essence of the understanding worth having, is that it's not as simple as finding somebody to blame. It's an opportunity to learn things about yourself. It's an opportunity to learn things about humanity. And I guess for me, that's the fascination, the psychology that you must sort of come across. I guess my question is, do you think about there being a line between evil and circumstances, or is that not how you experience it?
Well, first of all, I'm really sorry you went through what you went through, because stalking is one of the most horrendous things, because you never know when it's going to happen again. You never know how it's going to escalate. So I'm really sorry you've been through it. I mean, in terms of good and evil, I think there's a continuum. I think it's almost like a spectrum of people who kind of sit somewhere along that, and almost always there is and I'm not justifying what I'm about to say. Almost always there is some kind of trigger that makes people do bad things. So your stalker, for example, abhorrent as it is, will have honestly believed her misguided and vitriolic views about your faith and about your heritage, and about your partner,
and about my motivation.
And about your motivation, yeah. So she will have, in her mind, she will have had an idea. Now, in other parts of her life, I don't know what she did, and we don't need to sort of dignify her by talking about her. But in other parts of her life, she might have been an absolute angel. But she might have been a carer of people. She might give lots to charity. She might work tremendously hard in a very worthwhile job or something like that. But that part of her life, she believes that she's right to do it, even though it's obviously, it's obviously horrific, and I hope she got punished for it. So I think there is this continuum. I mean, how often do we hear when somebody's, charged with an offence or convicted of an offence, oh, but they were always, they were so lovely and they could never do that. I mean, I've heard it so many times. You go to see parents of young people that have committed crime. Well, he would never do that. He would never, well, I'm sorry, but he has, but people see different sides of them because people are 360 degrees. They're three-dimensional. There are different sides to everybody.
I had this conversation with a former acting student it was actually talking about a book recommendation. It was nothing to do with crime. What he said to me, which stuck with me forever, was, but if you're absolutely sure this person will love this book, and then keep pushing it. And the reason it stuck with me for this is he did not differentiate in his mind between being absolutely sure and being right. And that felt very interesting. And that's something that I think about with characters. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Absolutely. And they're, I'm not going to name names, but we see, in politics today, we see people that are absolutely sure of things and in my mind couldn't be more wrong. But I think with characters, that resolve, that drive, that certainty that they are sure. In City on Fire, which is a collision between big pharmaceutical companies and the police, the antagonist, Ben Parsons, absolutely believes what he's doing is right. And he's killing people, he's kidnapping people, he's intimidating people, all because he wants to flood the streets with heroin to enable his substitute opioid to be trialled in Brighton and therefore him to make huge amounts of money out of it and also to fund his mother to go to America for medical treatment. In his mind, the means absolutely justify the end. But, the reader hopefully will not side with him on that. But that's how I tried to create him. His certainty, even though he's wrong, is basically unassailable.
And that's the secret, isn't it? It's how have they got to the point where that for them is the black and white morality of life. And it's so far off from potentially probably where we are. And is that a starting place for you as a writer?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I was told very early on when I was writing Bad for Good, actually, and when I was with my previous agent, a character in there, and again, I've got to be a little bit careful because it's a bit of a reveal at the end.
Yeah.
A character in there was too evil. No redeeming features at all. My agent said, it just doesn't work, and it taught me a lesson really that actually, you have to start from a position of self-justification for the antagonists, and then let them go wild from there.
So starting with almost just taking the stalker example, you're right, she had a regular job. She actually worked in the same building as a member of my family and she never knew it. And I didn't know it until afterwards. But there was this whole absolutely, I think the word normal is quite poisonous at the best of times, but this absolutely normal life going on. And then, as you say, there is this section that is separate, but it's based on something lit that match. There was something existing ethically, emotionally, that meant that the right triggers mean, excitement ensues. And I guess that's what you're talking about here, that it's not about going, this person is a 2D baddie, that they're just that's all there is to it. Because if there is, it's almost like the story is of less value anyway, isn't it? No,
absolutely. If you're writing a full-length novel, you need to sustain that conflict between antagonist and protagonist, whether the antagonist is a person or not, but in this circumstance they are. So antagonist and protagonist, you can't sustain that if there's nothing visceral on the antagonist's side other than evil. There has to be a motivation, and that motivation has to be equal or greater than the protagonist, because actually you want them to be, looking like they're gonna win the battle. So there needs to be this. Everyone's what does it they say? Everyone's a star in their own movie or something like that, isn't it? Yeah. Whatever the phrase is, and that's very much how I write my antagonists. And in fact, I think in all of my books, I never excuse the behaviour by saying, it's because this happened, that they were inevitably going to go down this route. But I always just touch on, refer to something in the antagonist's past in a contextually appropriate way that hopefully makes the reader go, oh, I see. I'll give you an example, in real life for me. And I refer to it in Death Comes Knocking. So when I was a child, I was very good friends with I can't remember the pseudonym I gave him in Death Comes Knocking, but let's call him Stephen. His name's not Stephen. With a lad called Stephen. Our parents were very, very close. We were around each other's houses all the time. Went to school together, went to church together, everything. We were best buddies. And as happens, as you get into your teenage years, we kind of drifted off into different directions, but still were in touch until we weren't when we were about sort of 18, 19. But obviously I knew of him. I think my mum might have still had occasional contact with his mum, but it was just, it was a good friendship. I was working at I think it's Haywards Heath Police Station, and somebody phoned up for I was a DS. Somebody phoned up for one of my detective constables and said, "Oh, this chap's in the front office. He's just been released from prison, wants to recover the property that was taken from him when he was arrested." So it's kind of pretty normal thing. That's what happens. You take a load of stuff and they go to prison, and half that stuff's not evidential, and you give it back to them when they come out of prison. Nothing extraordinary in that. So I went downstairs because the DC wasn't around. I said, I'll come down and do it. It won't take 5 minutes. So I came downstairs, got the bag of property, went into the interview room, and there was Stephen in the interview room. And I went, "Come on, mate." And I was just like, "Is it? Yeah, no, it is. Oh, mate, don't go away. I'll be right back with you. I've just got to go and give this stuff back to some bloke that's just come out of prison, but 5-10 minutes max. But hang on, we'll catch up." And he went, "I am that bloke. I'm the bloke that you've got to give the stuff back to." And I went, "I'm sorry." 2 hours later, I left that room. We unpicked each other's lives. And basically what had happened is that I'm kind of at the age where late teens, early 20s was when sort of, Apple started, computers started, and, it wasn't even the days of the internet, but, the IT boom was really starting, and he got into that and got really, really wealthy in that, but had nothing, had nothing to spend it on really. So was partying, got into drink, got into drugs, fast forward, became a drug addicted burglar, being a heroin addict, and was literally, he had got married and had children in the meantime. All that had gone because of his addiction. And basically he was living from, fix to fix to fix, day to day to day, into prison, out of prison, into prison, out of, that was his life. And he said, "This isn't the first time I've come to a police station to collect my property." He said, "I've been doing it for the last 10 years. What? So, and we started talking about, I said, "Well, how did that happen then?" Because we were kind of on the same tracks. We were literally, we had the same upbringing, same values, but, how did that happen? What made me, the detective sergeant, sitting this side of the table, and you, the recently released prisoner, sitting that side of the table? And we, neither, other than the fact that he got money and part, I could have got money, but it might have been me coming into that kind of really taught me something about why people do things, why people commit crime, why people will put everything at risk for the sake of something. He's not a bad person. He did very bad things and unforgivable for the people whose houses he broke into, but that could have been me. So it's not, in most cases, in almost all cases, it's not genetic. It's kind of circumstances and choice. And, our paths might have crossed and it would have been totally different for me. So, that kind of taught me a lot about the psychology of criminals, really, is that, most criminals that I met actually are a victim of their own circumstance and their own choice. Because there's a lot of people, of course, that, would have got into a lot of money in those years and didn't end up in prison, didn't end up burgling houses. So there's choice in there as well, but it's also circumstance.
And there's something in the very act of storytelling as well, that as I'm hearing you say that, I'm thinking among two things. One, the story that you were telling yourself at the time shows that you do have that awareness and understanding of choice, but also that author brain, that making sense of the storytelling, it goes down the career route if we actively choose it to. But even if we don't actively become storytellers in that respect, noticing we're already storytellers, what am I entitled to? Who do I get to be? Is something that comes into us a lot. And this is why I do feel creative writing, not only for publication, but for understanding of our own psychology, is a very useful and important thing. Because that what if that you've just described, the circumstances of you and him, one of the things that comes into that is, how do I respond to the things that have happened to me? And since I mean, I'm sure we've all got our own examples, but since I've been more aware of the power of self-esteem, this is what's happening. It doesn't necessarily mean what I think it means. What else could I think it means? And if I think A instead of B, how do I behave? Are often behind how we make a lot of our most important decisions, who we think we're entitled to be, or time is another one. People who fundamentally say, I don't have time to themselves, don't always put the things that are most important to them first in the time they do have, or act in ways, the behaviours are not what helps us in the long run. So, I mean, just the sheer richness of psychology and behaviour that you see in the police force, and how that intersects with your own personal stories, just there's just so much.
In the police, it's a bit of a cliche, but you see the whole of life's tapestry in the police, not just, the people you're dealing with, within the police as well. There are some terrible, terrible things that have gone on within policing. We all know them. We all know about Wayne Couzens and the like. There's some terrible things, but there are also some amazing things, and, incredibly courageous people, incredibly selfless people with, so much creativity and innovation to make the world a better place. And all of that is in this kind of melting pot called policing. And it's the same on the outside as well. I've worked with some people that I would literally, give a knighthood in the moment, who work in communities for nothing, making their communities better. And there are people that I've worked with that I would put in prison in the moment for nothing because of what they do. But there is this kind of crossover as well, this Venn diagram of people that can be both. And I think that's where fiction writing really has its, that's the seam that we should be sort of tapping into, is the nuance, the conflict, just the richness of the human condition.
Do you find that your power of observation or your training to your observation remains heightened, given that your job was to sort of look at what's going on around you and see it coming before it does? That, for me, is a pretty good description of being a fiction writer as well.
Yeah. Well, if you were to ask my wife, she'd say I never had a power of observation at all. But having said that, I think there is something, and I kind of have an ability, and this isn't just me. This is, most people that have done the job that I did. I have an ability to kind of almost have it's a radar really about when things just aren't quite right. So, and it's about kind of recognition of threat really. That's where it comes in. If I'm talking to you, out on the street, and we're having a chat, and there'll be, and you're about to kind of punch me or run away or something like that, there'll be a tell somewhere. And I might not be able to identify what it is in the moment. I'll know that something's about to change. If I see a crime being committed, and I've seen crimes being committed since I've left the police, I catalogue the information in a far more logical sense than the average member of the public would be, probably because I know what the police will want to know if they, if they want to talk to me and take a statement from me. That then sharpens that power of observation. But finding my keys and my phone are just impossible. I can't do that.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that that doesn't get cured with police and
no.
And
it goes back to your example of getting to mind the antagonist when you can't find your keys.
Something I hear from other ex-police, current literary, in that world, is the frustration when artists create circumstances that are just fundamentally not how it would go down. Where do you draw the line on that? I mean, either as a consultant or as an author, will you bend reality for the sake of the story?
Yeah, well, obviously, I mean, I've got a thriving business out of this. So. But the most important thing to say is the story, or the story and the characters always come first. So you can have your cake and eat it. So, if you want your character to do a particular thing, I'll just give an example. So one of the things I see regularly, almost on a daily basis, is police officers of too high a rank carrying out operational tasks that they wouldn't usually carry out. So a detective chief inspector going and interviewing somebody, or arresting somebody, or carrying out a search. It just doesn't happen at all in real life. However, in a fictional world, there are reasons, or there are ways in which you can make that happen. And I thought this is particularly the case if somebody comes to me, or this is, I've just heard about you. This is the third book of my series, and my protagonist is DCI so-and-so. In the first two books, you just say, oh dear, wouldn't normally do that. So my job, and I think the job of anyone who is across policing and creativity, is being able to enable the characters and the circumstances to develop as the writer wants them to, but to create an authentic basis for that. So there are lots of ways. For example, I will enable somebody of too high a rank to do a particular thing. So I worked on a program called We Hunt Together, which was on the BBC. It was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek procedural, but it was also very, very dark. Now, on the second series, so I'd worked on the first series and given the advice on the scripts, etc. So watched that. So I saw how the actors were, I saw who the actors were and how they were playing the parts. In the second series, they wanted a superintendent to turn up at a search of a farmhouse and barns and everything. And there's no way a superintendent would be there. That's not their job. Their job is to run things back from the incident room. No way they would do it. But having seen the actor, I can't remember what her name is, that's a brilliant actor, but having seen the way she was in the first series, I thought, no, I can absolutely see why you want her there. But she wouldn't normally be there. So I said to them, okay, well, when she turns up, because she turned up in the script shortly after the two main characters that were, I think, a DC and a DS. When she turns up, can the DS and the DC just kind of say, what's she doing here? She got her own job to do, something like that. And then that immediately tells particularly the knowledgeable viewer that wouldn't normally happen, but it's going to happen because that's kind of what she's decided. The way they did it was even better than that. And it was all to do with camera shots. So they had her turning up in the car, get out of the car, stand up, look around. These two look at her, look at each other, mutual eye roll, and carry on. And that was all it needed to show that wouldn't normally happen. Now, somebody that's looking at, the reality versus fiction in too much of a sort of linear way would say, well, no, she can't be there. She can't be there. She needs to be talking to them on the phone if she's going to do that. Well, that's not the story. That's not what the characters are like. So you kind of have to work a way through it. Some things are just ridiculous. And, I'm not going to sort of give particular examples here, but some programs that are very successful and the recommissioned are lazy in terms of getting that authenticity into great drama.
And it's finding the reasons, isn't it? Because your real life story that you told about meeting the person who's not really called Stephen on the other side of the desk, that happened because you happened to say, oh, it's going to take me 5 minutes, I'll go and ... So you've lived that.
Exactly. Yeah. Even when I was was a very senior officer and I wouldn't normally see fresh air or breathe fresh air at all because I'd been stuck in the police station. I found myself in circumstances where I was out and about. So there's usually a way to do things. There's usually a way that you can manipulate. But I can understand where writers, both authors and TV writers, haven't even tried to understand the authenticity and the credibility of their story and characters and just kind of done it anyway. I think that's a bit insulting to the people that are doing the job day in, day out.
And what I'm hearing from that is it's not about changing the circumstances, it's about building the motivation for the circumstances.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you have a character, I mean, most people wouldn't survive now. Most middle-ranking officers wouldn't survive if they were kind of shouty, sweary, fly off the handle types. But if that's the character, then there's often work you can do earlier on in the story to try and make that sound credible, and that's kind of where I specialise really, is making the incredible credible. Actually, I might use that as a strapline.
Well, you heard it here first, as does everybody else. I won't be taking an Asian commission, though. You're fine. Something plot-wise that I feel is another really good influence that crime fiction has on me, on my clients, on whoever wants it really. The thing I do in my head is I use the clap emoji, the clap like that in the phone. I go, what happened? And that's how I catch myself if I'm going too far down the digression of how everybody's psychology is terribly interesting and, look at that picture on the wall and we've now been here for 7 hours and we really needed a line, obviously for the record, write it first, edit it later for the love of God. But it's that what happens, knowing what the spinal column of the story is absolutely vital unless you want to spend decades doing something that you could do better in a lot less. I feel like crime fiction is brilliant for that because it is what happened and it's not at the expense of the characterization, but it is very crucially about timing and interaction over introspection, which is the one that I want to copyright, is interaction over introspection. I mean, that to me is everything. So, it's, do you feel like that's about crime fiction? Do you feel it's good discipline?
100%. And I do like your insistence on write first, edit later. That's exactly how I work. For me, when I'm writing, it's probably less what happened. It's what's this for? What's this scene for? What is this character for? What is this storyline for? Because story is about action, reaction, and then action, isn't it? So something happens, something else happens, and then something happens because of that. And it's kind of, and you have to have that. So, you can't, particularly, as you say, particularly in crime fiction, you can't go off into fantastical worlds, describing this beautiful meadow or this wonderful architecture, or whatever. You want the guy being chased with a knife. That's what you want in crime fiction. And it is, for me, I mean, I'm told that I do try, which is quite it's a good coincidence. I'm told I write very pacey fiction, and that's because it's always kind of, okay, right, what's happening because of that? What's happening because of that? What's happening because of that now? And it's kind of, but it comes out better after about the third edit than it does in the first draft, I have to say.
And people need to trust that, don't they? I think that's what aside from if I did have my time machine, my first stop would be David Bowie in 75, but my second stop would be to go back as a writer and tell myself to go and do the what happened, so that you can save anything that doesn't actually fit here for a different story, because you're not killing things. You're taking them, you're giving them lots of space to run around in another Word document.
No, exactly. Exactly that. Exactly. And do you overwrite when you're writing first draft? Do you overwrite words? Yeah, I do too. And I think that helps, because then you're forced then to trim things back. So you really everything's got to earn its place on the page.
Something somebody said to me very early on, which covers a lot of ground, is save thy drafts. Because then you can safely cut whatever you need to see if it works. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean you've killed something. No. If you need the essence of it back, you can find it.
I took a scene out of Bad for Good because I was really struggling with word count, and it was a bit of a vanity scene, to be honest, because I just wanted to write it. I can't tell you where, because I can tell you where it ended up. It ended up in a different form, but with the same kind of essence in City on Fire, because I just thought, I still love it, So 2 books later, I just thought, and I'm going to use it for this bit. And it was something that was very kind of real to me. Well, basically it was about responding to a police officer, being attacked call, and what it feels like to go to that, and, all your emotions, and, how your judgment can go and all that. So, but it didn't really have its place in Bad for Good, but it did in City on Fire. So I went, change that, put that in there, change a bit around it. So as you say, it's never lost.
And it's a bit like gardening in a way, that I repotted something yesterday into something that the plant is, or I say I did it, my neighbour is much better at it. Plants.
You had people to do it for you.
So what my friend Sandro did was take something that was in a less good flower pot. It's still attached to the same railings. It's still doing exactly what it was doing before, but because he's better at it, he was brilliant, actually. He gets this ball of roots, puts it in a new pot. It's doing the same job, but the whole thing looks more beautiful. Whereas if you feel that wherever things land the first time, that's it. All you're going to do is stagnate. And I love that as an example, that it is pottering around. It is, you can try things in different pots. You can make the thing look more like yourself, because what I do see, I expect you probably have students, clients like this as well, where people are so desperate to get the book published that they don't realize they might not be looking at the book. They might be looking at bits of 3 books that could all have enough space to run around. But if you're trying to pack every idea into too small a container, it's not going to be fun, and it's not going to flow. Yeah. And, the more fun we have, the better it tends to go.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And some of the best books that I read are the ones that actually the story is quite simple. There's not lots of distractions going on, but it just keeps you locked into this particular story. And, I do wonder, as you say, whether the author, when they were thinking that, thinking, I'll take that bit out. That'll be the next book, and that'll be the next book after that, and that'll be the next book after that. And maybe that's why some people write so quickly and so diligently, is because actually they would have put it all in one book if they'd have had the chance.
Do you find that completing an outline or a story or a book is faster than it was for the confidence of knowing you've done it before? Hasn't it worked like that?
I don't plan in fine detail, but I do structure. I use the 5-act structure, and I kind of have my plot points set out, and I need to know to get from one to the other. I didn't do that on Bad for Good when I first wrote it, and it was all over the place. And I went back and redid it. But so I've got a better system now, and I've also got a system that I can trust in. I know it works because I've done it before. So even when I'm thinking, oh God, I'm really not sure about, whether this is going to work or not. I just go, well, okay, when as I said a second ago, my way is to write it and then edit later. So I'll just write it and edit later, put a note in the margin saying, might need to revisit this, or this might not work, or whatever. But when I first wrote Bad for Good, the first draft, and there was I don't know how many drafts there was, loads of them. But the first draft, it was, I was going forward, 5,000 words, going back 3,000, going forward another 2,000, going back another 2,000. And I was never getting anywhere with it. So, and now just writing and then editing, I'm much quicker, much more confident, and know that the process will out in the end.
There's so much in that, isn't there, is knowing that whatever you're doing now is not the final thing you're doing. So to get on to the next thing is... And
I think that's where debut writers struggle, because they obviously they read great books all the time. They go, I could never write like that. I could never write like Freedom McFadden or Steve Kavanagh or whoever. And you go, well, neither can they when they're doing their first draft.
Yeah.
This is stuff that's gone through lots of re-edits and feedback, and you're seeing the polished version. At the moment you've got the block of granite, and you're trying to make a sculpture out of it. This isn't the statue yet. The statue will be at the end, and you will get there.
That is such a beautiful thing to remember, is that it is going to happen. You can't expect the statue to arrive before the process that makes the statue.
Exactly. Yeah.
What works for you as a writer, or what boundaries have you put in place so that you get the best out of your writing time, your writing life?
I wish I was more disciplined than I was, would be the first thing. But when I'm writing first draft, I will generally set aside at least 2 hours in the morning just for writing, just for getting words on the page. And I tend to do it around 11 o'clock. And the reason I do that, we very sadly, we lost our dog just before Christmas, but it used to be tied in with the dog walk. So do the dog walk, come back, write for 2 hours. Now it could be a little bit more flexible, but just always try and write 2 hours, always try and get sort of 1,500, 2,000 words down. Might be rubbish words, but words down anyway. And just keep it that sort of 5 days a week. I'm not one of these people that needs to write or could write 7 days a week. I need a break, so 5 days a week, and just literally just write it down and not worry about the quality of it at that stage. In fact, I've a good friend of mine who some people will have heard of, I'm sure most people would have heard of, Dorothy Coomson, says to me, because I kind of use her as a bit of a sounding board. If I say, oh yeah, but I'm not sure about this character, she says, don't worry about that. That's Graham's problem in 3 months' time. This Graham just has to get the words on the page. And so I very much separate the writing from the editing. The editing, which is actually my favourite part of the process, the editing and re-editing, I can just pick up and leave chapter by chapter, during the course. And I try and edit about 4,000 to 5,000 words a day if I can, but I don't beat myself up if I can't,
So those 2 hours are sacred. That's get words on the page.
Yeah.
Then previously dog walk, now mentally dog walk.
Yeah.
Move a bit. And then edit.
Yeah, if I'm editing something else, I won't edit while I'm writing the same book. So I've just finished a first draft. Well, I've just finished it. I finished it a little while ago, and now I'm editing that at the moment. But I'm also writing something new. So at the moment, I'm editing and writing. So that makes it, my writing day slightly longer. But
so I had an episode. It's an interview every other week, and then it's me talking to everybody in between. And one of the questions that I asked was project or palette cleanser, because I'm a palette cleanser writer. What you're describing there, where you do something for 2 hours and then you have a break and your brain does something different, different project. I find that very cleansing. That helps me. If I am one project at a time, I get a bit commitment phobe. No, that's not fair. It isn't commitment phobe. I love the project, but I do find I work better if I go from one thing to another, whereas some people have to be, this is the thing.
Yeah. I mean, I can't do that anyway, because I have such a heavy client load in terms of the advisory work that I have to, I have to fit that in as well. And
can we talk about that actually, about just how you structure the time? Because I mean, I'm interested for myself too, because I see clients afternoon, evening more, and writing in the mornings. Is it like that? Is it different?
Yeah, I try to keep those 2 hours, the 11 to 1 sacrosanct, but sometimes I'll shift them, but I will shift them. I won't kind of just go, I'll just eat into that. If I'm doing sort of 1-to-1 advising, which is usually over Zoom or something like that, that tends to be afternoon, evening, because that tends to be when people are around anyway. If I'm doing manuscript reviews or part manuscript reviews or script reviews, then that's very much, I can fit that in. I can fit that in wherever. Sometimes, if I'm honest, the volume of advisory work means that, or maybe I've got to travel to go and do it or something like that, means that I can't actually get the writing in that day, but I try and make up for it elsewhere. But I do,
pay it back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm quite good at writing and editing and working on trains and stuff like that. And I'm really good at using downtime for thinking too. And sometimes I don't even know I'm doing it. And suddenly I go, oh my God, do you know that? I'm sort of at the gym or out, when we had a dog, but, out walking, we were walking at the weekend. Oh God, yeah, that, that's been troubling me so long. And it's so obvious now, because just literally my brain is not wrestling with it anymore. It's just,
it just hands it to you.
Yeah, it does.
With a little bow.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about Bad for Good. This isn't a massive spoiler, but do you remember the reveal about Bob Heaton, the DI?
I do.
I wanted to give him, he started off as a bit of a bit character. He was just going to, almost like a cameo really, of this sort of scruffy detective that, was sort of coasting to retirement. I thought, there's more in it. And then I thought, but I've got to give him something different. And it just occurred to me, I won't say exactly what it is, but it just occurred to me on a walk. I was thinking, of course he's going to be struggling if if that's what's going on in his life. And it just took on a life of its own then. And then a big storyline came from it. But that wasn't me, bashing my head against the desk thinking about what am I going to do with Bob. It was walking out in the fields with the dog.
And it hands it to you. And I think the through line of this conversation is motivation can mean that any action, any person you want to get in any place, you can do. It's not about feeling the idea doesn't work. It's about doing the groundwork underneath that, so you have that motivation. Either looking back on you starting as a writer, when you're talking to your clients, what are the things that you wish you'd known or that you gift to other people?
I suppose the first thing is that if I can do it, anyone can do it, really. It's never too late. It's never too late to start. Perfection comes with hard work, and trust yourself. I get so many, I'm sure you get it all the time. People say, oh, I'd love to write a book. I never thought I could. Well, you're never going to know until you try. And you might be right. You might not be able to do it, but you might be able to. And, so just give it a try. And it's that self-belief, that trust, that kind of, that understanding that everybody starts from somewhere, and why not make your somewhere here and now? That would be what I would say. I mean, as I said, I never had a notion of being a writer at all. It was only because, I got to know Peter James, and he kind of suggested writing a non-fiction with him. That's really what got me into it. But if I did have a notion, then I hope that I would have thought, well, I'll try. I mean, I did, with fiction writing, I was writing non-fiction before. With fiction writing, I thought, can I actually tell a story? Can I make up a story and tell it? And it was hard work, and it was lots of false starts, but I managed to do it in the end. And I've done it a few times since. So I was 58 when Bad for Good came out. I mean, I've been writing it since I was 12. No, but I was 58 when that came out. So it's never too late.
And it is first and foremost about the joy, that if there is a story in you, you're going to enjoy finding out. It's not about how fast can this happen. It's about how well can I write it.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Enjoy writing it.
And everyone in the industry is always, agents and editors, but obviously there are deadlines. When you're contracted, there's deadlines, but they just say, make this the best book it can be. Just make don't rush it, don't push it. They'll come back and go, oh, yeah, cut 10,000 words off here, and you're 2 months late there. But essentially, it's making it the best story it can possibly be, and
allowing that to be a problem for future you.
Yeah,
not second guessing.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly that.
Absolutely. Respond to the evidence. You mentioned that you have a new podcast coming up.
Yes. We haven't. We're going to record it soon. We're going to start recording. In fact, we're going to have a dummy record tomorrow. So 3 ex-cops, myself, John Sutherland, and Gary Wright, are going to present a podcast called Pros and Cons, and it's our strap line is books, crimes, and nonsense. So it's going to be a really chatty kind of 3-way conversation. We're going to talk about, you know, what's current around crime, what's current around policing, what's current around crime novels, TV drama, that sort of thing. We're going to have a guest every. We haven't really worked out how often we're going to, but we're going to aim to have a guest every episode. However, whatever the interval between episodes are. And initially those guests are going to be people who have got foots in both the criminal justice and the writing camp. So it'll be crime writers that have either been police officers or judges or lawyers or forensic scientists or whatever. And we're just going to have a very, very light-hearted kind of chat about it. I think that the trick will be keeping those two idiots in order, to be honest, because we just thought it was a bit of a, might be just something fun to try, you know. Lots of people are always interested in, you know, how do you become a cop and then a crime writer, and just talking about all of those areas together.
That's what appeals to me, is that immersing yourself in the humour of it, in the shared references. You find out a lot about personalities, industries, just through being in a room with the conversation. Yeah,
we're going to do. Yeah, we're doing a dry run tomorrow, and then I'm not going to say who our first guest is, but it's a big name crime writer who's agreed to do it. So because this won't come out until at least May, probably people can go and find that after they have listened to this. So yes, I know I will be. Yes, and I don't know where you can find it at the moment, but Google will help you. So my website is www.policeadvisor.co.uk, and the website is basically the jump off point for any crime writer that wants any support around authenticity, credibility, facts around how crimes are investigated and what happens. On that website, I think we've got probably about 25 other experts that work with me across a range of disciplines: forensics, psychology, prisons, scenes of crime, counter-terrorism. So you can tap into any one of those experts, and we'll give you the help you need to make your story authentic but still dramatic.
And do you work with strictly crime writers only, or people who want to improve their plotting, get a bit more snappy?
I do that as well. I do that as a separate thing with Jericho Writers. I run the crime and thriller course for Jericho Writers, where obviously it's themed around crimes and thrillers, but a lot of the principles are the same around character and setting and dialogue and that sort of thing.
Brilliant. Well, crime writers, you know where to go and find Graham.
Absolutely.
Graham Bartlett, thank you so much for joining the Writers' Gym.
Thank you, Rachel. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You've visited the Writers' Gym with author and coach Dr Rachel Knightley. Production and sound design are by Ashley Lexine, and theme music is by Chris Gregory.